Hello guys, this is your friend Multiverse Shinobi 2.0 and we are back with a new fanfic. What if the secret legacy of Sparda? Why Konoha feared Hinata's real power, full story part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please give me hype instead of comment and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. Chapter 1. The Shattered Mirror of Sparda, Part 1. The world of a child is often painted in vibrant hues of simplicity, the warmth of a mother's embrace, the stoic reassurance of a father's presence, and the endless horizon of tomorrow. For Hinata Sparda, that world was not just a home, it was a sanctuary of legends. But legends, as she would soon learn, are often written in blood before they are etched in gold. Hi everyone. This is a reimagined beginning. In this tale, the lineage of Sparda is expanded. Nero is not the son of Virgil, but the youngest brother of Dante and Virgil. The bonds of family are the ultimate power, and here, they are tested like never before. Welcome to the Chronicle of the Sparda Daughters. My name is Hinata Sparda. The words felt heavy, even as she thought them. Writing a diary felt beneath her, a chore imposed by a cousin who possessed too much energy and too little restraint. But the story had to be told. It wasn't just her story. It was the story of a fall from grace and a journey into the unknown. She sat in her room, the walls painted in soft hues of lavender and deep cobalt blue. Outside, the world was still, but inside her mind, the memories were shifting like sand. I was born to Virgil Sparda, she wrote, her pen moving with a precision that mirrored her father's blade work. The eldest son of the Dark Knight Sparda. To the world, he was a storm, cold, relentless, and seeking power. To me, he was the man who taught me that power is nothing without the will to protect. Her mother, Harumi Tsukikaze, was the anchor to Virgil's drifting soul. Harumi came from the Tsukikaze clan, a lineage of demons who wielded magic like poets wield words. She was a woman of fire and kindness, a paradox that only a man like Virgil could truly appreciate. Her clan had called her weak because she chose compassion over cruelty. They had cast her out, but in the shadows of the human world, she found something far more potent than the magic of her kin. She found love. The story of their meeting was one Hinata cherished, though Virgil would never admit the details. He had returned from the depths of the underworld, wounded and weary, his pride battered but his spirit unbroken. Harumi had found him in a rain-slicked alleyway, a fallen god in a mortal city. She didn't fear the demonic aura radiating from him, she only saw a man in pain. She took him in, nursed his wounds, and in the quiet moments of recovery, the son of Sparda found a reason to stop running from his heart. He was stoic, Hinata noted, a small smile playing on her lips. She was the only one who could make him laugh. Not a loud, boisterous laugh like Uncle Dante's, but a soft, rare sound that felt like a secret shared between the stars. Hinata's own birth on December 27th was a day of rare peace. She was born with her mother's features, the raven black hair with a bluish tint, the pale lavender eyes that seemed to see through the veils of the world, and skin as fair as moonlight. She looked nothing like the rugged, battle-hardened Sparda men, a fact she often thanked the heavens for. I can't imagine myself scowling at a pizza box like Uncle Dante, she mused. But the piece was a fragile glass dome. 3 months after her arrival, the family expanded. Trish, the woman who shared the face of the legendary Eva and the heart of a warrior, gave birth to Ino. If Hinata was the moon, Ino was a supernova. Loud, vibrant, and fiercely protective, Ino Sparda was the perfect foil to Hinata's calm. Then came Sakura, the daughter of Nero and the demoness Sariel. Sakura was the youngest, a pink-haired whirlwind with a temper that could rival a volcano. They were the 3 pillars of the next generation. They trained under the watchful eyes of the brothers. They learned the weight of a sword and the responsibility of their bloodline. Until the day the sky turned red. Hinata was 6 years old. The scent of rain was heavy in the air. Her father was away, scouting a disturbance in the ley lines. She was in her room, reading a book on ancient runes, when the scream shattered the silence. It was a sound that didn't belong in their home. It was her mother. She ran. Her small feet thudded against the wooden floorboards, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. When she reached the kitchen, the world stopped making sense. Demons. They were hideous, bipedal creatures with skin the color of rotting moss and eyes like burning embers. They held her mother down. Harumi didn't scream for help, she didn't beg. She looked at Hinata, and in that gaze, there was only one command: live. A fourth demon, their leader, stepped forward. His voice was a rasp of grinding stones. Let this be a lesson to your family, filthy abomination. Hinata watched, paralyzed by a terror so profound it felt like ice in her veins. She saw the demon's hand plunge into her mother's chest. She saw the light fade from those kind, warm eyes. Hina-bi, don't be afraid, those were her mother's last words. The scream that tore from Hinata's throat wasn't human. It was the sound of a legacy breaking. Chapter 2. The Echoes of the Void. The transition from the cold, damp cave to the sun-drenched streets of Konohagakure was not a physical journey for the three girls, it was a violent fracturing of the soul. When Lucia's incantation took hold, it didn't just suppress memories, it tore them out by the roots, leaving bleeding gaps in their consciousness that the mind desperately tried to fill with the mundane. Hinata woke up on the cold stone steps of the Hyuga compound. Her head throbbed with a rhythmic cadence, a pulsing ache that felt like the rhythmic swinging of a blade she no longer remembered owning. Above her, the sky was a piercing blue, devoid of the demonic crimson that had stained her last moments of clarity. Elder daughter. A voice called out. It was cold, formal, and lacked the hidden warmth of the man who had once called her his star. Hiyashi Hyuga looked down at her. To him, she was his flesh and blood, the heiress to a prestigious bloodline. To Hinata, he was a stranger whose face felt like a poorly fitted mask. She stood up, her movements fluid and precise, a grace that didn't belong to a 6-year-old. Father, she whispered. The word felt like ash in her mouth. She didn't know why, but every time she looked at the Hyuga crest, she felt a phantom weight at her hip, as if a long, curved sword should be resting there, waiting for the flick of a thumb to release its power. Across the village, in the vibrant greenhouses of the Yamanaka clan, a blonde whirlwind was causing havoc. Ino was supposed to be learning the delicate art of flower arrangement, but her hands were too restless. She kept gripping the shears not like a tool, but like a dagger. Ino pig, pay attention, a pink-haired girl shouted from across the flower beds. Sakura. They looked at each other, and for a split second, the world glitched. The flowers turned into piles of silver skulls, the sunny greenhouse became a burning office filled with the smell of gunpowder and cheap pizza. Ino gasped, dropping the shears. Did you see that? Sakura blinked, her emerald eyes wide. See what? You're just being weird, Ino. My head hurts. I think I stayed up too late studying. Studying what? Ino asked, her voice trembling. Because I keep thinking about red motorcycles. And a woman with long blonde hair who smelled like electricity. Sakura shook her head, her pink hair swaying. I don't know about motorcycles, but I keep dreaming about a blue arm. A glowing, blue arm that reaches out and grabs things from a distance. It's just a dream, right? They were sisters in a life they couldn't recall, bound by blood that sang of rebellion and power. But in the village of Konoha, they were just children of the leaf, their true heritage buried under layers of seals and false history. The training grounds. The first crack. A week later, the academy students were gathered for a basic taijutsu sparring session. Hinata stood across from a boy with a loud voice and orange jumpsuit, but her mind was miles away. She was watching the way the wind moved the leaves. To everyone else, it was nature. To her, it was a series of trajectories. Begin. The instructor yelled. Naruto lunged forward, a sloppy punch aimed at Hinata's face. Usually, Hinata would flinch. Usually, she would shy away. But today, something inside her snapped. The gentle fist was supposed to be soft. It was supposed to flow. But as Hinata moved, her chakra didn't flow like water, it struck like lightning. She didn't use her palms. She used her fingers like a needle, striking Naruto's pressure points with a speed that the human eye could barely track. Zip, zip, zip. In 3 moves, Naruto was on the ground, his limbs paralyzed. But Hinata didn't stop. She stood over him, her lavender eyes glowing with a terrifying, cold light. She felt a surge of cold power, dark Slayer energy, coursing through her veins. Weakness is a choice, she muttered in a voice that wasn't her own. It was deeper, more melodic, and infinitely more dangerous. Power is everything. Hinata. That's enough. Hiyashi shouted from the sidelines, his heart racing. He saw it. For a fraction of a second, the air behind Hinata had distorted, forming the faint, ghostly image of a man in a blue coat, holding a katana. The image vanished as quickly as it appeared. Hinata blinked, the cold light fading from her eyes. She looked down at her hands, trembling. I'm sorry, she whispered, falling back into the role of the shy Hyuga girl. But the seal was cracked. The blood of Sparda was beginning to boil. The night of the red moon. That night, the 3 girls, Ino, Sakura, and Hinata, all had the same dream. They were standing in a circle in a dark forest. In the center of the circle stood 3 men. One wore red, his face hidden by the brim of a hat. One wore blue, his back turned, his silver hair shimmering like a blade. The third wore black and blue, a massive sword strapped to his back, a glowing arm resting at his side. The man in red turned. He smirked, tossing a silver coin into the air. Don't forget, girls, he said, his voice echoing through the void of their erased memories. Jackpot. The girls woke up simultaneously, sweating and gasping for air. In the Hyuga compound, Hinata reached under her pillow. Her hand brushed against something cold and metallic that shouldn't have been there. She pulled it out. It was a small, silver amulet. Half of a larger hole. As she gripped it, the blue chakra in her body flared. She didn't know who she was. She didn't know where she came from. But as she looked out at the moon over Konoha, Hinata Sparda knew one thing. The storm was coming, and she was the one who would bring it. Chapter 3. The Resonance of Steel. The silver amulet felt like a live wire in Hinata's palm, pulsing with a rhythmic heat that synchronized with her heartbeat. In the silent darkness of her room, the air grew heavy, thick with the scent of ozone and ancient dust. She didn't belong here. The silk pajamas, the tatami mats, the oppressive silence of the Hyuga household, it felt like a costume she was forced to wear. She closed her eyes, and for the first time, she didn't try to push the headaches away. She leaned into the pain. Clang, clang, clang. The sound of steel striking steel echoed in her mind. She saw a man, tall, silver-haired, his coat the color of a winter sky, moving with such speed that he seemed to exist in 3 places at once. He was looking at her. Not with the disappointment of Hiyashi Hyuga, but with a terrifying, expectant pride. Concentrate, Hinata, the memory whispered. Your soul is the blade. The blade is your soul. Do not just swing, transcend. Her eyes snapped open. The lavender was gone, replaced by a piercing, crystalline blue. She stood up and walked toward the wall. Without thinking, she reached into the empty air, her fingers curling as if grasping a hilt. The air shivered. A rift of blue light tore open, a small, jagged tear in reality. From within the void, the hilt of a katana emerged. It was wrapped in white silk, the guard shaped like an intricate golden flower. Yamato. As her fingers brushed the silk, a shockwave of pure energy erupted from her, silent but devastating. It didn't break the furniture, it simply ceased to exist in the path of the wave. The amulet around her neck glowed fiercely. The secret meeting. Ino couldn't sleep. The dream of the man in red was so vivid she could smell the leather of his coat and the acrid scent of gunpowder. She found herself at the Yamanaka training grounds at 3 a.m., her hands shaking. It's not real, she muttered, trying to focus on her mind transfer jutsu. I'm Ino Yamanaka. I like flowers. I like Sa. She stopped. The name Sasuke felt hollow. Like a crush written in a book she didn't care for anymore. You're out late, too. Ino spun around. Sakura was standing in the shadows of a willow tree. But she looked different. Her posture was wider, her hands tucked into the pockets of a red hoodie she definitely wasn't supposed to own. Sakura, Ino whispered. Did you see him too? The man with the glowing arm. Sakura stepped into the moonlight. Her eyes were rimmed with red, as if she had been crying, but her expression was one of raw, unadulterated fury. He called me, kid. He told me to rev my engine. Ino, I don't know what's happening, but look at this. Sakura held out her right hand. She concentrated, her face contorting with effort. Suddenly, her skin didn't just glow, it transformed. Ghostly, translucent blue armor encased her forearm, shimmering with a demonic light. A spectral claw, 3 times the size of her hand, flickered in and out of existence. The Devil Bringer. Ino gasped, but she didn't feel fear. She felt a spark of recognition. My turn, she said, her voice dropping an octave. She reached behind her back, into a space that shouldn't have been there. With a grunt of effort, she hauled out a massive, broad-shouldered sword. The hilt was carved into the shape of a screaming skull, and the blade was thick, heavy, and stained with the memories of 1,000 battles. Rebellion. Where did we get these? Sakura whispered, reaching out to touch the flat of the massive blade. We didn't get them, a new voice said. Both girls jumped as Hinata stepped out from the trees. She wasn't the shy, stuttering girl they knew. She walked with a lethal, predatory grace, the white-sheathed katana tucked into her belt. Her presence was cold, so cold it made the dew on the grass turn to frost. Hinata, Ino asked, her eyes wide. You too. We aren't who they say we are, Hinata said, her voice sounding like the chime of a frozen bell. The Hyuga, the Yamanaka, the Haruno, they are cages. Our fathers didn't leave us here to be ninjas. They left us here to survive. Survive what? Sakura asked, her spectral claw pulsing with blue fire. The thing that killed our mothers, Hinata replied. She looked up at the moon. I remember the blood. I remember the smell of rot. They're coming for us. The incident wasn't the end. It was a delay. The test of blood. Before they could speak further, the temperature in the clearing plummeted. The shadows beneath the trees began to stretch and writhe, peeling themselves off the ground like wet paper. 3 creatures emerged. They were tall, skeletal, draped in tattered black robes, and carrying jagged scythes that pulsed with a sickly purple light. Hell Kana. What are those? Ino yelled, swinging rebellion upward. The weight of the sword should have crushed her, but it felt light as a feather, an extension of her own limb. Practice, Hinata said. She didn't draw her sword. She waited until the first demon lunged, its scythe whistling through the air. In a blur of motion, air trick, she disappeared and reappeared behind the creature. Clink. She had moved so fast the girls hadn't even seen her thumb the guard. A sphere of blue slashes, judgment cut, enveloped the demon. It stood still for a second before shattering into 1,000 pieces of black ash. Whoa, Sakura breathed. She turned as the second demon swung at her. Instinct took over. She didn't dodge. She lunged forward, her devil bringer arm glowing bright. Get out of my face. She grabbed the demon's head with the spectral claw and slammed it into the dirt with enough force to create a small crater. She didn't stop there. She revved an invisible throttle in her mind, and her fist exploded with fire, obliterating the monster. Ino faced the last one. She felt a wild, manic energy bubbling in her chest. She began to laugh, a sharp, daring sound. She fired a blast of spiritual energy from the tip of rebellion, then charged, swinging the massive slab of metal like a baseball bat. Jackpot! She screamed as she cleaved the demon in half. As the last of the ash drifted away, the 3 girls stood in the center of the clearing, breathing hard. The weapons in their hands began to glow and then faded, returning to the pocket dimensions of their souls. They looked at each other. The facade of the Konoha girls was gone. In its place stood the 3 heiresses of the underworld. We can't tell anyone, Hinata commanded. Not the Hokage. Not our parents. If the demons found us, it means the seal is failing. We need to get stronger. We need to find out where our fathers went. And if they're dead? Sakura asked softly. Ino gripped the spot where rebellion had been. Then we'll go to hell and drag them back ourselves. Hinata nodded, her eyes flashing blue one last time. Then the training starts tomorrow. No more flowers. No more gentle fists. From now on, we are the Sparda. Chapter 4. The Masquerade of the Shinobi. The weeks following the encounter in the woods were a masterclass in deception. In the bustling streets of Konoha, Hinata remained the stuttering, shy heiress, Ino remained the fashion-obsessed rival, and Sakura remained the bookish, tempered student. But beneath the surface, the blood of Sparda was screaming. Every night, while the village slept under the watchful gaze of the Hokage's stone faces, the three girls met in the deepest, most forgotten parts of the forest. They weren't practicing shuriken jutsu or basic clones. They were learning the language of their weapons. You're overthinking it again, Ino, Hinata said, her voice like a chilling breeze. She was standing on the surface of a lake, her feet barely causing a ripple, not through chakra control, but through sheer spiritual weight. Ino was panting, leaning on rebellion. The massive blade was buried inches deep into a scorched tree trunk. It's heavy, Hina. How did Uncle Dante swing this thing like a toothpick? My arms feel like they're going to fall off. It's not heavy because of its size, Hinata replied, her hand resting on the hilt of Yamato. It's heavy because you're fighting it. You're trying to use your muscles. Use your will. That sword isn't a tool, it's a manifestation of your rebellious spirit. Stop trying to be a Yamanaka, and start being a jackass. Ino blinked, then a slow, wicked smirk spread across her face. A jackass, huh, I can do that. She gripped the hilt, closed her eyes, and let out a sharp, jagged laugh. Suddenly, the weight shifted. The sword felt as light as a balsa wood prop. With a primal yell, she swung the blade in a wide arc, sending a shockwave of red energy that sliced through 3 trees simultaneously. Better, Hinata conceded. The assignment, the piece of their secret training, was interrupted by the reality of their fake lives. Team 7 and Team 8 were summoned to the Hokage's office. Old man Sarutobi sat behind his desk, the smoke from his pipe curling into the air. Beside him stood Kakashi Hatake, looking bored as ever, and Kurenai Yuhi, who looked at Hinata with a concerned, motherly gaze. You have all shown great progress, the third Hokage began. However, a request has come in from the Land of Waves. It was originally a C-rank mission, but there have been reports of unusual disturbances. Hinata's eyes narrowed. Disturbances. What kind of disturbances, Lord Hokage? Sakura asked, her voice perfectly modulated to sound like a curious genin. Inside, she felt a devil bringer itching beneath her glove, sensing something foul in the air. Vanishings, Kakashi answered for the Hokage. And sightings of shadow men that don't bleed when cut. We're sending both teams together for safety. You leave at dawn. As they walked out of the office, Hinata caught the eyes of Ino and Sakura. No words were needed. The demons were spreading. Konoha wasn't just a hiding place anymore, it was a target. The Land of Waves. The first real test. The journey to the Land of Waves was a tedious exercise in restraint. Hinata had to pretend to trip over tree roots. Ino had to pretend to care about her hair. Sakura had to pretend she wasn't strong enough to punch a hole through a mountain. They were being watched, not just by Kakashi and Kurenai, but by a presence in the mist. When the attack finally came, it wasn't the Demon Brothers or Zabuza Momochi. Those were threats for ninjas. What emerged from the thick, gray fog was something far more ancient. The mist curdled, turning a sickly violet. Out of the darkness stepped a creature that stood 10 feet tall, its body made of shifting, black smoke and jagged shards of ice. It carried a massive, rusted cleaver that dripped with blue ichor. A frost. Everyone, get back, Kakashi shouted, his hand flying to his headband to reveal his Sharingan. This isn't a normal rogue ninja. Kurenai drew her kunai, her face pale. The genjutsu, it's not working. It's like it has no mind to influence. The frost lunged, its speed defying its size. It aimed directly for the weakest link, Hinata. Hinata, move, Naruto yelled, rushing forward with a kunai. But Hinata didn't move. She didn't flinch. She stood her ground, her head bowed, her bluish-black hair casting a shadow over her eyes. Kakashi-sensei, Hinata said, her voice devoid of its usual stutter. It was cold, sharp, and carried the weight of 1,000 winters. Please, keep the boys back. This is family business. Before Kakashi could react, Hinata's hand moved. It was a blur, a flash of silver and blue light. Clang. The Frost's massive cleaver was stopped midair by a slender, white-sheathed katana. The ground beneath Hinata's feet cracked from the pressure, but she didn't budge an inch. Ino. Sakura. Formations, Hinata commanded. Finally, Ino yelled, tossing her purple academy jacket aside. She reached into the air, and the air screamed back as rebellion manifested in her hands. Let's rev it up, Sakura shouted. She didn't draw a sword. She simply slammed her right fist into her left palm. The fabric of her glove exploded as the Devil Bringer revealed itself, glowing with a fierce, ethereal blue light. The ninja of Konoha stood frozen. Naruto, Sasuke, Kakashi, and Kurenai watched in absolute silence as the three, weak, girls of their village transformed into goddesses of war. What are they? Sasuke whispered, his Sharingan spinning wildly, trying to track the sheer amount of raw, demonic energy, power, pouring off his classmates. They aren't ninjas, Kakashi muttered, his voice trembling with a mix of awe and terror. There's something else entirely. Hinata didn't look back. She stared into the yellow eyes of the Frost. You chose the wrong bloodline to hunt, she whispered. With a flick of her wrist, she pushed the giant beast back. Let's show them, Hinata said, a rare, predatory smirk crossing her lips. Let's show them why the world fears the name Sparda. Chapter 5. The Dance of the Nephilim. The mist of the land of waves didn't just feel cold anymore, it felt hollow. The presence of the frost had sucked the life out of the surrounding air, turning the bridge to be into a frozen graveyard. But the chill emanating from Hinata, Ino, and Sakura was different. It wasn't the cold of ice, it was the cold of the abyss. Kakashi Hatake stood paralyzed, his Sharingan darting between the three girls. He had seen S-ranked Kinjutsu, he had seen the power of tailed beasts, but the energy radiating from the Sparda cousins was alien. It didn't feel like chakra. It felt like will given physical form. Hinata, get back. That thing is, Naruto started, but the words died in his throat as Hinata moved. She didn't run. She shifted. In a blink, trick action, she was gone, leaving only a faint blue afterimage. She appeared directly above the frost, her hand resting on the hilt of Yamato. Don't blink, she whispered. She didn't even fully draw the blade. A 2-inch flash of silver escaped the scabbard, and the world seemed to stutter. Judgment cut. A sphere of distorted space enveloped the frost, and within that sphere, hundreds of invisible slashes carved through the demon's crystalline hide. The frost roared, its body shattering into jagged chunks of ice. But it wasn't dead yet. The pieces began to vibrate, attempting to reform. Oh no, you don't. Ino yelled. She leapt over Kakashi's head, rebellion held high above her. She didn't have Hinata's surgical precision, she had her uncle Dante's flair for the dramatic. She slammed the massive blade into the center of the reforming ice. Prop shredder. Ino spun the sword like a propeller, the serrated edges of the skull-etched blade grinding the ice into fine powder. Red sparks flew as the demonic steel met the supernatural ice. Ino was laughing, a wild, infectious sound that made Kurenai's blood run cold. This wasn't the girl who obsessed over hair ribbons, this was a predator in her element. The devil's grip. From the thick fog, two more frosts emerged, sensing the blood of their ancient enemy. They lunged at Sakura, their claws extended like frozen spears. Sakura, look out, Sasuke shouted, his hand reaching for a shuriken. Sakura didn't even turn around. Her right arm, the Devil Bringer, glowed with a light so intense it pierced through the mist. The spectral blue claw grew in size, becoming a massive, ethereal limb that reached out and snatched the first frost out of the air. My turn to play, Sakura growled. She slammed the demon into the ground, then hauled it back up only to toss it into the second frost. She revved the invisible throttle in her soul, and the air around her right arm began to distort with heat. Buster. She grabbed both demons by their faces, her spectral claws digging into their skulls. With a roar of effort, she smashed their heads together with such force that a shockwave of blue energy cleared the mist for 50 yards in every direction. The demons didn't just break, they vaporized. The silent observer, high above on a jagged rock, hidden by a veil of high-level genjutsu, a man watched the spectacle. His skin was the color of parchment, and his golden eyes narrowed with a hunger that was almost palpable. Orochimaru licked his lips, his long tongue flickering. Kukuku, what a delicious development, he hissed to himself. I came for the Uchiha, but I find 3 gems far more precious. That energy, it isn't the sage's power. It's older, darker, the blood of the underworld. He watched Hinata sheath Yamato with a sharp click, the finality of the sound echoing across the water. He saw the way the girls looked at their teachers, no longer as students, but as equals who were merely tolerating a charade. The Sparda lineage, Orochimaru whispered, his eyes fixed on the silver amulet glowing on Hinata's chest. I must have it. The aftermath. Back on the bridge, silence reigned. The frosts were gone, leaving nothing but melting puddles of black ichor. Ino leaned rebellion against her shoulder, the massive sword slowly fading into a shimmer of red light before vanishing. Sakura's devil bringer retreated, her glove magically reforming over the scales and glowing veins. Hinata stood perfectly still, her breath even, her lavender eyes returning to their deceptive softness. Kakashi stepped forward, his hand still on his kunai. Care to explain? Hinata looked at him. There was no stutter, no blush. We told you, sensei. It's family business. You can report this to the Hokage, or you can help us finish the mission. But if you try to take these weapons, you'll find out why our fathers are legends. Naruto looked at Hinata as if seeing her for the first time. Hinata. You're amazing. No, Naruto, Hinata said, her gaze softening just a fraction for her orange-clad friend. I'm just a daughter looking for the truth. She turned toward the horizon where the sun was beginning to break through the fog. The bridge needs to be built. Zabuza is still out there. And I have a feeling he's not the only one watching us. Chapter 6. The weight of the name. The air in the land of waves had changed. It was no longer just the damp, salt-heavy atmosphere of a coastal nation, it was charged with the static of 3 awakening souls. Kakashi Hatake, a man who had seen the horrors of the Third Shinobi War and the darkness of the Anbu, found himself walking several paces behind his own students. He watched Hinata. She walked with a rhythmic, measured stride that he had only ever seen in master swordsmen. Every step was a calculation. Every glance was a tactical assessment. She wasn't a genin, she was a predator wearing a leaf headband. Hinata, Kakashi called out softly. She didn't stop, but her head tilted slightly to the side. Yes, sensei. That sword, Yamato. I've read the archives of every great blade in the 5 great nations. The 7 swords of the mist, the Kusanagi, none of them match the signature of that katana. Where did it come from? Hinata paused, looking out at the unfinished bridge. It didn't come from this world, Kakashi-sensei. My father once told me that Yamato is the key that separates the world of man from the world of demons. It doesn't just cut flesh. It cuts the fabric of reality itself. Before Kakashi could press further, a sudden surge of killing intent washed over them. It was thick, cold, and smelled of iron and old blood. The silent killing. The mist rolled in again, but this time it was natural, the work of a master. Zabuza Momochi appeared on the bridge, his massive kubikiribocho resting on his shoulder. Beside him stood the masked hunter Nin, Haku. Zabuza's eyes, however, weren't on Kakashi. They were locked on Hinata, Ino, and Sakura. So, Zabuza rasped, his voice muffled by his bandages. The rumors I heard from the forest were true. You aren't just brats. You're the ones who slaughtered the frost demons. Haku stepped forward, his Senbon needles glinting in the pale light. Zabuza-sama, their energy, it is unlike anything I have ever felt. It is not chakra. It is something much more ancient. Haku, take the pink one and the blonde, Zabuza commanded, his grip tightening on his sword. I'll take the one in blue. I want to see if that toothpick of hers can actually stand up to an executioner's blade. Ino stepped forward, a wild grin splitting her face. A toothpick? Oh, you're going to regret saying that, big guy. She reached into the air, and rebellion materialized with a roar of red lightning. The sheer weight of the sword hitting the bridge caused the wood to groan. Sakura, you ready? Ino asked. Sakura slammed her fist into her palm, the devil bringer glowing a fierce, cobalt blue. Let's show them how a Sparda handles a silent killer. The Clash of Legends. The battle didn't start with a kunai throw. It started with a shockwave. Zabuza lunged at Hinata, swinging his massive cleaver in a horizontal arc designed to bisect her. Hinata didn't move until the blade was inches from her neck. Clink. With a speed that rendered the Sharingan almost useless, Hinata drew Yamato exactly 1 inch. The clash of the two blades created a spark that lit up the mist like a lightning strike. Is that all? Hinata asked, her voice a whisper of ice. She fully drew the blade. The air screamed. She didn't just parry, she flowed around Zabuza's strength. Her movements were a blur of rapid slashes. Zabuza, a man known for his speed, found himself struggling to keep track of her. Every time he swung, she was already gone, leaving only the faint scent of ozone and the blue trail of her blade. Meanwhile, Ino and Sakura were dealing with Haku's crystal ice mirrors. He's too fast, Sakura yelled, dodging a flurry of needles. We can't hit what we can't see. Then stop trying to see him. Ino shouted. She planted rebellion into the ground. Uncle Dante always said, if you can't find the target, blow up the whole room. Ino closed her eyes, tapping into the chaotic, rebellious energy of her bloodline. She didn't use chakra, she used raw drive. She swung rebellion upward, releasing a massive wave of red energy that shattered 3 of Haku's mirrors instantly. As Haku fell from his perch, Sakura was already moving. Her spectral arm reached out, extending twice its length. Snatch. The blue claw grabbed Haku midair and slammed him toward the ground. Sakura followed up with a jump, her fist revving with a sound like a high-performance engine. Streak. She propelled herself forward, a blur of pink and blue, slamming her fist into Haku's defensive ice wall, shattering it like glass. The awakening. Zabuza was breathing hard. He had cuts on his arms, his legs, and even his cheek. Hinata, however, looked like she hadn't even started. Who are you? Zabuza demanded, his pride shattered. No child has this kind of power. Hinata raised Yamato, the blade glowing with a terrifying, ethereal light. I am the daughter of the man who walked through hell and came back. I am Hinata Sparda, and you are in my way. She held the katana in a high guard. This is the end, demon of the mist. She moved. It wasn't a run, it was a teleportation. Judgment cut end. For a single heartbeat, the entire bridge was encased in a dome of blue light. Within that dome, space itself was being sliced into millions of pieces. Zabuza's Kubikiribocho began to crack. The mist was vaporized. But just as the final blow was about to land, Hinata felt a sharp, burning pain in her chest. Her amulet, the gift from her father, was vibrating violently. Hina-B, run. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind, accompanied by a vision of a massive, black tower rising from the earth. The distraction was only a second, but it was enough. The blue dome shattered prematurely. Hinata fell to one knee, gasping for air. The demonic energy was too much for her 6-year-old body to contain for long. The incident had left scars on her soul that were still healing. Zabuza, realizing he had been spared by a fluke, grabbed the injured Haku. We're leaving, he hissed. He didn't look back. He had seen a glimpse of true power, and for the first time in his life, the demon of the mist was afraid. The aftermath. The bridge fell silent. Kakashi approached Hinata, who was shaking, her hand still white-knuckled around Yamato's hilt. Hinata, stop, Kakashi said gently, reaching for her shoulder. As soon as his hand touched her, he felt a jolt of pure, unadulterated cold. He saw a flash of a man with silver hair and a blue coat, standing over a mountain of corpses. Hinata looked up at him. The blue light in her eyes faded, replaced by the familiar lavender, but the warmth was gone. They're coming, sensei, she whispered. Who? Kakashi asked. The ones who took my mother. The ones our fathers are fighting. She looked at Ino and Sakura, who were also exhausted, their weapons having vanished back into their souls. The village won't be enough to protect us anymore. We need to find the other half of the amulets. And where are they? Sakura asked, her voice trembling. Hinata looked toward the direction of Konoha. Deep beneath the village, in the place where the shadows live. We're going to have to face the man called Danzo. Chapter 7. The Shadows of the Root. The return to Konoha was not the triumphant march of heroes. It was a funeral procession for the innocence the village thought the girls still possessed. Throughout the trek back from the land of waves, Kakashi and Kurenai remained eerily silent. They didn't offer praise for the defeat of the Frosts or the retreat of Zabuza. Instead, they watched. Every time Hinata's hand twitched toward her waist, or Ino laughed a bit too loudly, or Sakura's right hand clenched into a fist, the Jonin exchanged looks of profound unease. They weren't just looking at students anymore. They were looking at ticking time bombs. The Hokage is going to want a full report, Kakashi finally said as the great gates of Konoha came into view. And not just about the mission. Hinata, the things we saw, they don't stay secret for long. Hinata didn't look at him. She stared straight ahead at the carved faces of the Hokage monument. Secrets are just lies waiting for a reason to be told, sensei. We aren't hiding anymore. The interrogation. As expected, they weren't allowed to go home to their compounds. Anbu operatives with porcelain masks met them at the gate and escorted the three girls directly to the council chambers. The room was circular, draped in shadows. In the center sat the third Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi. To his left were the elders, Koharu and Homura. And to his right, half submerged in the gloom, sat the man Hinata had seen in her premonition, Danzo Shimura. His right arm and eye were wrapped in bandages, and he leaned on a cane with a grip of iron. His presence felt like a stagnant pond, thick, suffocating, and rotting. Report, Danzo commanded, his voice a dry rasp. Kakashi stepped forward, his posture rigid. The mission was compromised by S-rank demonic entities. The genin, Hinata Hyuga, Ino Yamanaka, and Sakura Haruno, displayed abilities that were not taught in the academy. They utilized weapons of unknown origin and energy signatures that bypassed standard ninja defenses. Unknown origin, Koharu scoffed. Hiyashi, do you know of these swords in your clan's possession? Hiyashi Hyuga, who had been standing in the shadows, stepped forward. His face was a mask of stoic fury. The Hyuga possess no such relics. What my daughter displayed is a perversion of our bloodline. Hinata felt the cold sting of his words, but it didn't hurt as it once would have. She wasn't a Hyuga. Not really. She was a Sparda. It is no perversion, Hinata spoke up, her voice echoing with a clarity that silenced the room. She stepped into the light, her silver amulet glinting. It is an inheritance. One you have tried to bury beneath your will of fire. Danzo's one visible eye narrowed. Child, you speak of things you do not understand. Those weapons, that devil energy, it is a threat to the stability of this village. Under the laws of the Hidden Leaf, all such artifacts must be surrendered to the state for safety and study. Ino stepped up beside Hinata, her hand resting on the space where rebellion lay dormant. Try and take it, old man. I'd love to see you lift a sword that weighs more than your entire ego. Ino. Silence. Her father, Inoichi, hissed from the sidelines, though his eyes were filled with a terrifying mix of pride and fear. The infiltration. The council ended in a stalemate. The Hokage, ever the diplomat, refused to seize the weapons immediately but placed the girls under house arrest, within their respective compounds under 24-hour Anbu surveillance. But Anbu were trained to catch ninjas. They weren't trained to catch the daughters of Sparda. That night, through a series of coordinated air tricks and spectral illusions from Ino's burgeoning demonic magic, the three girls met in the sewers beneath the village. Did you feel it? Sakura asked, her devil bringer pulsing with a dull blue light through her glove. When we were in that room, my arm was screaming. It wasn't just Danzo. There's something else down here. Something that smells like our fathers. The other half of the amulets, Hinata said, her eyes glowing crystalline blue. My father, Virgil, once spoke of a vault beneath a city of leaves. He thought the humans would keep it safe. He didn't realize they would try to weaponize it. They moved through the dark tunnels with predatory silence. Hinata led the way, using the resonance between her amulet and the missing pieces to navigate the labyrinth. They reached a massive stone door etched with sealing jutsu so complex they would have made a sealing master weep. But Hinata didn't use a key. She didn't use a counter seal. She simply placed her hand on the cold stone. Blood of my blood, she whispered. The stone didn't just unlock, it shuddered. The seals turned from red to a brilliant, neon blue. The door ground open, revealing a chamber filled with scrolls, jars of preserved eyes, and in the center, resting on a pedestal of black obsidian, were two silver amulets identical to Hinata's. There they are, Ino breathed, reaching out. Wait, Sakura yelled, her devil bringer arm snapping out to catch Ino's wrist. From the shadows of the vault, dozens of figures emerged. They didn't wear the porcelain masks of the Anbu. They wore the blank, soulless expressions of Root. And at the center stood Danzo, his bandages unwinding to reveal an arm embedded with stolen Sharingan eyes. I knew you would come, Danzo said, his voice dripping with greed. The blood of the Sparda is the ultimate power. With those amulets and your bodies as vessels, Konoha will never fear another nation again. Hinata drew Yamato just an inch, the clink echoing like a death knell. You talk too much, old man, Hinata said, her bluish-black hair whipping around her face as a vortex of cold wind began to swirl. You wanted to see the power of the underworld. We'll show it to you. But I promise, you won't survive the lesson. The vault exploded into a frenzy of blue and red light as the battle for the Sparda legacy truly began. Chapter 8. The Red Grave of Konoha. The air in the subterranean vault of Root was no longer air, it was a pressurized mixture of blood, ozone, and ancient malice. The rows of stolen Sharingan eyes on Danzo's arm spun wildly, their crimson irises trying to track movements that defied the laws of physics. Kill them, Danzo commanded, his voice as cold as the stone walls. But do not damage the eyes. We need the Sparda blood intact. 20 Root operatives moved as one. They were the elite of the elite, emotionless, lethal, and trained to die for their master. But they were humans, and the three girls standing before them were shedding their humanity with every breath. The storm of the Dark Slayer. Hinata didn't wait for them to reach her. She didn't use the gentle fist. She stepped into the center of the charging pack, her hand a blurred silhouette against the white silk of Yamato's hilt. Slay all. In a fraction of a second, the room turned blue. Hinata moved like a ghost, weaving between the Root ninjas. She wasn't cutting their throats, she was cutting the space they occupied. Every time she thumbed the guard of her katana, a judgment cut erupted, a localized distortion of reality that shredded steel and armor alike. One Root operative lunged with a tanto, only to find himself frozen in midair. Hinata appeared behind him, sheathing her blade with a deliberate clink. The operative exploded into a spray of black ink and blood, his body unable to withstand the spatial trauma. Your will of fire is nothing but embers in the face of the storm, Hinata whispered, her eyes glowing with a crystalline light that made the Sharingan look dim. The rebellion of the soul. While Hinata was a surgical blade, Ino was a hurricane. She swung rebellion in a massive overhead arc, the weight of the sword crushing the floor of the vault. You want my blood? Ino laughed, the sound echoing with a dark, manic edge. Come and get it. But it might be a bit too hot for you to handle. She slammed the hilt of rebellion into the ground, activating drive. A wave of red, jagged energy surged forward, cleaving through the stone pillars and sending root operatives flying like ragdolls. One ninja tried to use a water-style jutsu to dampen her momentum, but Ino simply charged through the torrent, her sword glowing with a dark, rebellious fire. I'm done being the pretty flower of the Yamanaka, she screamed, spinning rebellion like a lethal propeller. I am a Sparda, and I am the one who breaks the rules. The devil's grasp. Sakura stood her ground, her devil bringer arm pulsing with a rhythmic, bioluminescent glow. A root ninja attempted to bind her with shadow imitation, but the moment the shadow touched her feet, she let out a guttural roar. The blue spectral arm on her right side doubled in size, the claws elongating into wicked talons. She grabbed the shadow itself, ripping it out of the ground as if it were a physical rope. My turn, Sakura yelled. She leapt into the air, her spectral arm extending across the room. She snatched a ninja by his face and slammed him into a second operative. Then, she revved the invisible throttle in her soul. Maximum bet. She swung her glowing arm in a massive horizontal sweep, releasing a giant crescent of blue demonic energy that obliterated the front line of Danzo's guards. The heat was so intense it began to melt the obsidian pedestal in the center of the room. The grand entrance. Danzo watched his men fall with a mounting fury. He raised his arm, the stolen eyes focusing on Hinata. Enough. I will seal you myself. He began to weave signs for a high-level wood-style jutsu, the floor beginning to sprout gnarled, twisted roots. But just as the trap was about to spring, the ceiling of the vault didn't just break, it disintegrated. A flash of red lightning struck the center of the room, followed by the roar of a high-speed engine. Crash! A red motorcycle, sleek and glowing with demonic runes, slammed onto the obsidian pedestal, crushing it into dust. The rider skidded to a halt, kicking up a cloud of debris. He was tall, wearing a long red leather coat that looked like it had been through several wars, with two silver-plated handguns holstered at his hips and a massive sword strapped to his back. He hopped off the bike, casually dusting off his sleeves. He looked around the carnage, his silver hair messy and his smirk absolutely infuriating. Man, Konoha really needs to work on its ventilation, the man said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. It smells like old man and bad decisions down here. Uncle Dante. Ino cheered, her sword vanishing as she rushed toward him. Dante caught her in a one-armed hug, then looked at Hinata and Sakura with a wink. Hey, kids. Sorry I'm late. Your fathers and I got caught up in a game of cards in the underworld. Virgil cheated, as usual. Danzo's face was a mask of horror. Dante. The legendary devil hunter. What are you doing in my village? Dante turned his gaze toward Danzo, and for the first time, his playful expression vanished. The temperature in the room plummeted. The two guns, ebony and ivory, were in his hands before Danzo could even blink. Your village? Dante asked, his voice low and dangerous. Nah, you're just a parasite living in the walls. And you're touching my family. He spun the guns on his fingers, the barrels glowing with a lethal purple light. You have 10 seconds to get out of my sight before I show you why the demons in hell stay under the bed when I'm around. Dante, wait, Hinata said, stepping forward, her hand still on Yamato. He has the amulets. He has our mother's legacy. Dante looked at the shattered pedestal and the two silver amulets lying in the dust. He picked them up, tossing them to Ino and Sakura. I've got the amulets, Hina B, Dante said, using her mother's nickname for her. Now, why don't you girls take the bike and head for the gate? I've got some trash to take out. The three girls looked at each other, then at the man who had been their childhood hero. They nodded. As they climbed onto the demonic motorcycle, Cavalier, Hinata looked back at Danzo. The story of Sparda doesn't end in a vault, Danzo, Hinata said. It ends with you in the ground. With a roar of the engine, the bike shot up the vertical wall and out of the crater, leaving Dante alone in the dark with the man who had tried to steal their lives. Dante looked at Danzo and cracked his neck. So, you ever heard of a Smokin' Sexy Style, Beatdown. Chapter 9. The Path of the Exile. The wind whipped through Hinata's hair as Cavalier roared through the dense forests of the Land of Fire. The demonic motorcycle didn't follow the roads, it defied gravity, its wheels grinding against the vertical trunks of massive oaks and leaping across canyons that would have taken a ninja team hours to navigate. Ino sat behind Hinata, clutching the two reclaimed amulets to her chest as if they were beating hearts. Sakura sat at the rear, her Devil Bringer arm occasionally pulsing to swat away pursuing projectiles from the Anbu squads that had been dispatched to intercept them. "They're not giving up," Sakura yelled over the scream of the engine. She looked back to see a dozen white masked figures flickering through the canopy. "They think we're kidnapped. Let them think what they want," Hinata replied, her eyes fixed on the horizon. "We are no longer the property of the Hidden Leaf. We are the daughters of Sparda. Our allegiance is to the blood." She pushed the handle forward, and the bike surged, leaving a trail of purple electricity in its wake. The border confrontation. As they reached the border of the Land of Fire, a wall of iron sand rose from the earth, blocking the path. Standing atop the shifting metallic dunes was a young boy with hair the color of dried blood and a gourd strapped to his back. Gaara of the desert. Beside him stood Tamari and Kankuro. They had been on their way back to Sunagakure when the emergency signal from Konoha reached them: "Secure the three girls. Use any means necessary." "You," Gaara said, his voice a hollow vibration. "The ones with the tainted aura. My mother, she wants your blood." The sand surged forward like a tidal wave. Hinata slammed on the brakes, the motorcycle skidding to a halt and kicking up a massive cloud of dust. She hopped off, her hand already white-knuckled on the hilt of Yamato. "Move, Sandwalker," Hinata commanded. "We have no quarrel with your village. But if you stand in our way, I will cut the very sand you stand on." "Big words for a little girl," Tamari sneered, unfolding her giant fan. "Kankuro, take the blonde. I'll take the pink one." "I wouldn't do that if I were you," Ino said, stepping forward as rebellion materialized in a flash of red lightning. The weight of the sword shattered the ground beneath her feet. "I'm in a really, really bad mood." The clash of wills. The battle exploded instantly. Tamari swung her fan, releasing a gale of wind scythes, but Ino didn't dodge. She swung rebellion in a vertical arc, high side, cleaving the wind itself in two. The shockwave from the demonic steel sent Tamari stumbling back, her fan nearly flying from her hands. Kankuro launched his puppets, but Sakura didn't even wait for the strings to tighten. Her spectral claw reached out, grabbing the puppet Karasu by its head and crushing it into splinters with a single squeeze. "My turn," Sakura shouted, revving her internal engine. She leapt into the air, her fist glowing with a supernova of blue energy. "Showdown." She slammed her fist into the ground, creating a crater so large it swallowed Kankuro's remaining puppets. Meanwhile, Hinata and Gaara were locked in a dance of absolute lethality. Gaara's sand moved with the speed of thought, forming spears, shields, and grasping hands. But Hinata was faster. She used air trick to move through the sand as if she were made of smoke. Clink, clink, clink. Every time Gaara's sand touched her, a blue sphere of judgment cut erupted, turning the sand into glass and shattering it. "You seek power to feel alive," Hinata said, appearing directly in front of Gaara. Her blade was at his throat before his ultimate defense could even react. "We seek power because it is our birthright. There is a difference." Gaara stared into Hinata's eyes. For the first time in his life, he didn't see fear. He didn't see hatred. He saw a mirror of his own loneliness, and a strength that made his tailed beast, the Shukaku, tremble in terror. "The one tail is afraid of you," Gaara whispered, his sand dropping to the ground. The reunion. Before the fight could turn fatal, the sky above them darkened. A massive, swirling portal of blue light tore open in the air. From the portal stepped a man who looked like an older version of Hinata. He wore a long, navy blue trench coat, his silver hair was slicked back, and his presence was so heavy it felt as if the gravity in the area had doubled. Virgil. Beside him stood Nero, his mechanical arm, the overture, sparking with electricity, and Dante, who had apparently finished his cleaning in Konoha and caught up via a shortcut through the underworld. Father, Hinata whispered, her blade returning to its scabbard with a final, echoing click. Virgil looked at his daughter, his expression unreadable, though his eyes softened for a fraction of a second. You have grown, Hinata. You have kept the blade sharp. Nero walked over to Sakura, ruffling her pink hair with his human hand. Nice arm, kid. Glad to see you're using it to break things. Dante leaned against Cavalier, grinning at Ino. So, did you give him hell, kiddo? The best kind, Uncle Dante, Ino chirped, handing him the reclaimed amulets. Virgil turned his gaze toward the Sand siblings, who were frozen in awe and fear. Leave this place, he commanded. Tell your masters that the Sparda have returned. The world of men is no longer your concern. The gates are opening. Gaara nodded slowly, sensing that these men were beyond the power of any cage. He and his siblings retreated into the desert, leaving the Sparda family alone at the edge of the world. Virgil looked at his brothers, then at the three girls. The cult that killed Harumi, Trish, and Sariel, they have found the final seal. They seek to bring Mundus into this realm using the ley lines of the great nations. Then let them come, Hinata said, standing tall beside her father. We've been practicing. Dante laughed, drawing his twin pistols. That's my girl. All right, family, let's go to work. Chapter 10. The Awakening of the Blood. The air at the border of the Land of Fire was no longer stagnant, it was a swirling vortex of conflicting energies. The presence of the three original sons of Sparda, Virgil, Dante, and Nero, standing alongside their daughters created a localized rift in the fabric of reality. The trees groaned, and the ground pulsed like a living heart. The seal in the Land of Iron has already begun to bleed, Virgil stated, his voice a sharp blade of ice. He looked at the three girls, his eyes scanning their forms, noting the scratches on their armor and the fire in their eyes. You have survived the trial of the humans. But the demons of the higher circles will not be as fragile as the root. Wait, Dante interrupted, leaning casually on the handlebars of Cavalier. Before we go diving into the deep end of the pool, they're missing one thing. They've got the spirit, they've got the weapons, but they're still fighting like mortals. They're holding back. Nero nodded, his mechanical arm sparking. Dante's right. Sakura, you're using the bringer, but you're fighting it. You're trying to keep it contained. You need to let it consume you. Hinata looked at her father. The devil trigger. Virgil's gaze was unwavering. The manifestation of your true self. It is not a power-up, Hinata. It is the moment you stop lying to your own soul. You are not a Hyuga. You are not a human. You are a Sparda. The ritual of the abyss. Virgil led them to a desolate valley where the ley lines of the earth converged. The ground was blackened, stripped of life by the sheer pressure of the demonic energy below. To unlock the trigger, you must face the void, Virgil commanded. We will not help you. If you fail to tame the beast within, it will devour you, and we will be forced to put you down. The three girls stood in a triangle. Hinata held Yamato horizontally. Ino planted rebellion into the scorched earth. Sakura clenched her devil bringer until the blue veins glowed through her skin. Do it, Hinata whispered. They closed their eyes and dove inward. For Hinata, the void was a world of falling snow and unsheathed steel. She saw the image of her mother, smiling, and then saw the demon's hand tear her heart out. She felt the rage, not the hot, messy rage of a child, but the cold, absolute fury of a god. I am the storm that is approaching, she thought. I am the end of all things. For Ino, the void was a chaotic dance of fire and roses. She saw the expectations of the Yamanaka clan, the hair ribbons, the petty rivalries, and she burned them all. She saw Uncle Dante's smirk and realized that to be free, she had to be the rebellion. For Sakura, the void was a mechanical roar. She saw her father's struggles, the weight of the Red Queen, and the feeling of being an outsider. She grabbed that feeling with her spectral claw and crushed it. The transformation. Outside, The brothers watched as the girls began to change. A pillar of blue light erupted from Hinata. Her bluish-black hair flared white, and her lavender eyes turned a terrifying, glowing azure. Her skin was covered in sleek, cobalt blue chitinous armor. A pair of ethereal wings, shaped like the blades of 1,000 katanas, sprouted from her back. Hinata's devil trigger. A crimson explosion marked Ino's awakening. She didn't just grow armor, she became a creature of jagged, red crystal and leather. Her laughter echoed like 1,000 bells, and a crown of glowing thorns encircled her head. Her wings were like those of a fallen angel, tattered but magnificent. Ino's devil trigger. Sakura's transformation was the most violent. A blast of blue steam obscured her form. When it cleared, she stood tall, her entire right side transformed into a massive, glowing blue demonic construct. Her left side was encased in sleek white armor, and a second spectral arm hovered behind her, mimicking her every move. Sakura's devil trigger. The power release was so immense that the clouds above the land of fire were swept away, revealing a starry sky that seemed to tremble. The arrival of the messenger. As the girls slowly reverted to their human forms, gasping for air and feeling the sheer exhaustion of the change, a figure appeared on a nearby ridge. It wasn't a demon. It was a man in an orange jumpsuit, his face covered in grime and his eyes wide with disbelief. Naruto. He had followed them, driven by a promise he had made to himself never to let a friend go. But the girl he saw standing there wasn't the Hinata who used to faint at his sight. She was a warrior of legend, radiating a power that made the 9 tails within him curl up in its cage. Hinata. Naruto whispered, his voice shaking. What are you guys? Hinata turned her head. Her eyes still held a lingering blue glow. She looked at the boys she once thought she loved and realized that the world of ninjas was a sandbox compared to the ocean she was now swimming in. We are the defenders of this world, Naruto, Hinata said, her voice sounding like 2 voices speaking at once. But we are no longer part of it. Go back to Konoha. Tell them to prepare. The gates of hell are opening, and even the Hokage cannot stop what is coming. I'm not leaving you, Naruto yelled, his own orange chakra beginning to leak out. Nero stepped forward, placing a hand on the boy's shoulder. Listen, kid, you've got heart. But this is a family reunion. And things are about to get real messy. Suddenly, the ground shook with a violence that knocked Naruto off his feet. To the north, a massive beam of black light shot into the sky, tearing through the atmosphere. It's begun, Virgil said, drawing Yamato. Mundus's vanguard has arrived in the land of iron. The samurai will be slaughtered. Then let's give him a warm welcome, Dante said, revving Cavalier. The Sparda family, 6 strong, turned toward the black light. The Hidden Leaf, the Akatsuki, and the great nations were now secondary. The war between heaven and hell had officially spilled over into the world of shinobi. Chapter 11. The Iron Requiem. The land of iron was a nation of steel and snow, a neutral bastion where the samurai, men who eschewed the complex hand signs of the shinobi for the purity of the blade, stood guard over the peace of the world. But as the Sparda family crossed the border, the pristine white snow was no longer white. It was stained with a viscous, purple ichor, and the air was thick with the smell of scorched metal. The black beam of light Hinata had seen from the valley was now a towering pillar of darkness, a hellgate that had torn through the crust of the earth in the center of the samurai's capital. They're using the natural iron in the ground to stabilize the portal, Virgil observed, his eyes scanning the horizon with the cold precision of a strategist. A clever conduit. The metal acts as a lightning rod for demonic frequencies. Less talking, more walking, brother, Dante said, his boots crunching on the frozen ground. I can hear the party from here, and it sounds like they didn't invite us. The samurai's last stand. In the valley below, the samurai legions, led by General Mifune, were locked in a desperate struggle. They weren't fighting ninjas. They were fighting legion, masses of floating, stone-like spheres that birthed bladed horrors, and Proto-Angelo knights in heavy, cursed armor. Mifune, a man of legendary discipline, swung his katana, Kurosawa, with a speed that rivaled many Jonin. But for every demon he felled, 3 more emerged from the black pillar. General, our blades are chipping, one of his lieutenants cried out. These things, they aren't flesh and bone. Hold the line, Mifune roared. If we fall, the world follows. Just as a Proto-Angelo raised its massive greatsword to crush the tiring general, a blur of blue light flickered through the air. Clink. The demon's greatsword didn't just stop, it shattered into a million fragments. Hinata stood before Mifune, her back to him, her blue coat fluttering in the icy wind. She hadn't even fully drawn Yamato, but the pressure she exerted was enough to crater the ground. Your courage is commendable, samurai, Hinata said, her voice echoing with a calm authority. But your steel is too gentle for this rot. Step back. Mifune stared at the young girl's back. He could feel it, the sheer, unadulterated power radiating from her. What are you? I am the storm, Hinata replied. The vanguard of Mundus. From the Hellgate, a figure emerged that made the air itself scream. It was a massive, 3-headed beast encased in golden armor, carrying a trident that crackled with red lightning. Burial's successor. The Gyrian Knight. Sparda's whelps. The creature roared, its 3 voices harmonizing into a terrifying cacophony. You come to a slaughterhouse thinking you are the butchers. Mundus has waited 2 millennia for this blood. Funny, Ino said, stepping up beside Hinata, rebellion resting on her shoulder. My uncle says Mundus is just a grumpy statue with an eye fixation. We're here to give him a makeover. Ino didn't wait. She activated her devil trigger instantly. Her skin shifted into the jagged red crystal, and her wings unfurled, scattering embers across the snow. She charged, a streak of crimson fire. Stinger. She lunged forward, rebellion's point aimed at the knight's chest. The impact sent a shockwave that cleared the snow for miles. At the same time, Sakura leapt from a nearby cliff, her devil bringer arm glowing so brightly it turned the sky blue. Showdown. She manifested 2 spectral arms, and together with her father Nero, they began a dual assault of such raw brutality that the Gyrian knight's golden armor began to crack. They were a symphony of hammers, slamming the demon into the earth again and again. The Duel of the Slayers. While the younger generation engaged the vanguard, Virgil and Dante stood at the base of the Hellgate. They weren't looking at the knight, they were looking at the shadow within the pillar. He's not here yet, Dante muttered, his hand on Rebellion's hilt. No, Virgil agreed. He is sending his shadows to test our daughters. He wants to see if the blood has thinned. Well, Dante smirked, looking back at Hinata, who was currently cutting through a dozen Proto-Angelos with a single judgment cut end, her movements so fast she appeared to be a stationary statue in a field of falling limbs. I'd say the blood is just as spicy as ever. Hinata moved through the battlefield like a god of death. She saw a samurai about to be impaled and used air trick to appear between the blades. She didn't just save him, she used the momentum of the demon's own attack to redirect it, her Yamato whispering through the air. 1, 2, 3. The demons didn't even realize they were dead until Hinata sheathed her blade. Then, they simply fell apart in perfect, geometric slices. General Mifune, Hinata called out, her blue eyes glowing with demonic fire. Gather your men. Seal the perimeter. Do not let a single shadow escape this valley. We will take the gate. Mifune, a man who bowed to no one but his daimyo, bowed to the 6-year-old girl. As you command, Lady Sparda. The shadow of the Akatsuki. High above the valley, standing on the peaks of the Iron Mountains, 6 figures in black cloaks with red clouds watched the carnage. Pain, the leader of the Akatsuki, stared down at the Sparda family with his Rinnegan. Beside him, Conan looked disturbed. Their power, it transcends the tailed beasts, Conan whispered. They are rewriting the map of the world with every swing of their swords. They are an anomaly, Pain stated, his voice devoid of emotion. They seek to stop the peace I will bring. If the demons do not destroy them, the Akatsuki will. But for now, we watch. Let the monsters kill the monsters. Down in the valley, Hinata looked up at the mountain peak. Even from miles away, her Sparda senses felt the cold gaze of the Rinnegan. She let out a small, chilling smirk. First the demons, she whispered to herself. Then the gods. No one stops the Sparda. She turned back to the Hellgate, where the shadow of Mundus was finally beginning to take shape. The real war was just beginning. Chapter 12. The Council of the Damned. The snow in the land of iron was no longer falling, it was being vaporized. The black pillar of the Hellgate acted like a thermal sink, sucking the warmth from the atmosphere and replacing it with a localized pressure that made the samurai's heavy plate armor feel like lead. But the real weight wasn't coming from the gate. It was coming from the 5 silhouettes that had just landed on the surrounding peaks. The 5 cage had arrived. A4, the 4th Raikage, stood at the center, his lightning armor flickering with a frantic, unstable energy. Beside him, Gaara looked pale, his sand hovering in a protective sphere that refused to settle. Tsunade, Onoki, and Mei Terumi rounded out the assembly, their faces masks of pure, unadulterated shock. What in the name of the sage is that? Mei whispered, her eyes fixed on Hinata, who was currently standing in the center of a literal mountain of demon corpses, sheathing her blade with a calm, rhythmic click. That, Gaara said, his voice hollow, is the daughter of a legend. And those, he pointed to the sky, where the Hellgate pulsed, are things that make the Akatsuki look like children. The cage's ultimatum. The Raikage didn't wait for a diplomatic briefing. He descended from the peak like a golden thunderbolt, slamming into the snow yards away from Hinata. The ground shattered, but Hinata didn't even flinch. She simply looked at him with those crystalline blue eyes, eyes that held the coldness of the void. You. The Raikage roared, his fist crackling. You are the runaway from Konoha. The Hyuga brat. Explain yourself. What is this monstrosity you've brought to our world? Hinata tilted her head. I brought nothing, Raikage. This gate has been here for 2,000 years, buried beneath your feet. You were simply too blind to see the rot. Tsunade landed beside A4, her expression a mix of medical concern and Hokage-level fury. Hinata, stand down. We are taking control of this area. Whatever bloodline this is, it ends now. We will seal the gate and take you into custody for questioning. Seal it. A sharp, mocking laugh echoed from the shadows. Dante stepped forward, tossing a spent shell casing into the air. Hey, Granny, I'd love to see you try. But unless your seals are made of concentrated holy water and a lot of luck, you're just going to give that gate a tickle. Who are you? Onoki demanded, his particle style glowing between his palms. Just a guy who's been doing this since before your grandpa was in diapers, Dante smirked. The demonstration. The tension was broken by a sound that made the cage's blood run cold. A massive, three-eyed statue, the vanguard of Mundus, partially emerged from the black sludge of the Hellgate. It was the size of a mountain, its hands reaching out to crush the samurai fortifications. Sumi. The Raikage yelled, launching his lariat. He hit the statue with enough force to level a fortress, but his arm bounced off the demonic hide as if he had hit a wall of diamond. The lightning armor shattered upon contact. It absorbed the chakra. Tsunade gasped, realizing her strength of 100 seal was useless if she couldn't even make contact. Step aside, humans, Virgil's voice cut through the air like a razor. He didn't run. He simply appeared in front of the statue's face. In a motion so fast the Sharingan couldn't have tracked it, he drew Yamato a single inch. Behold, the space around the statue's head didn't just break, it folded. A series of geometric slashes appeared in the air, mirage blades, and the massive stone head was severed from its body, falling into the snow with a sound that shook the continent. Virgil sheathed his blade. You play at being cage, shadows of the world. But you are fighting an enemy that exists in the light of absolute darkness. If you wish to survive the night, stay out of our way. The Alliance of Necessity. The cage stood in silence. For the first time in history, the 5 most powerful ninjas in the world felt completely, utterly irrelevant. They aren't ninjas, Mei whispered. They're forces of nature. Hinata looked at her friends, Ino and Sakura, who were standing ready, their own devil triggers humming beneath their skin. She then looked back at the cage. We are going in, Hinata said, pointing toward the mouth of the Hellgate. We will close it from the other side. If we don't return, the world is yours to lose. But while we are in there, keep the stray demons from reaching the civilian sectors. That is the only mission you have left. Without waiting for a response, the Sparda family, the 6 of them, turned and walked directly into the swirling black abyss. As they vanished, the Rakage slumped his shoulders, his pride finally broken. Get the messengers out, he muttered. Tell every village to prepare for the end of the world. Because the demons just went home, and they took our children with them. Chapter 13. The Descent into Pandemonium. The air inside the Hellgate was not gas, it was a pressurized soup of despair and ancient, suffocating heat. As Hinata, Ino, and Sakura stepped through the threshold, the world of the Land of Iron vanished. There was no more snow, no more samurai, and no more sky. They stood upon a bridge made of calcified bone, spanning a void that hummed with the screams of a billion lost souls. Above them, the sky was a swirling vortex of purple clouds and jagged obsidian spires that grew downward like teeth. Welcome home, ladies, Dante's voice echoed, though he was nowhere to be seen. The portal had separated them from their fathers and Uncle Nero, a classic tactical move by the underworld to divide and conquer. We aren't home, Hinata said, her hand tightening on Yamato. We're in the belly of the beast. Ino, Sakura, check your pulses. The air here acts like a poison to human blood. If you feel your heart slowing, force the demonic energy to circulate. Mine's racing, Ino replied, already drawing rebellion. The blade seemed to pulse with a dark light, hungry for the familiar environment. It feels like the sword is finally waking up. It wants to eat. Sakura revved her devil bringer. Blue sparks jumped from her scales, illuminating the dim, gore-stained path ahead. Let it eat. Because we've got company. The guardians of the first circle. From the shadows of the bone bridge, the Hell Judecca emerged. They were tall, spindly horrors with multiple cloth-wrapped arms, carrying jagged scythes and masks that wept black ink. They didn't walk. They teleported in rhythmic, jerky movements. Teleporters, Sakura growled. I hate teleporters. Then don't let them move, Hinata commanded. She didn't run. She closed her eyes, sensing the ripples in the space-time fabric of the underworld. When the first Judecca reappeared behind her, Hinata didn't even turn. She performed a perfect judgment cut. The air shattered. The demon was sliced into 17 pieces before it could even raise its scythe. But there were hundreds. The Judecca began a coordinated dance, summoning Hell Antinora, berserker demons with dual meat cleavers that turned red with rage the moment they were struck. Ino, left. Sakura, right, Hinata shouted. Ino dived into the fray, her movements a chaotic blur of Swordmaster style. She swung rebellion in a wide circle, creating a round trip where the sword flew on its own, carving through the Antinora. While the sword was airborne, Ino used her bare fists, infused with demonic fire, to punch through the chest of a Judecca. Jackpot! She yelled, catching rebellion midair and slamming it down into an overdrive blast that cleared the bridge. Sakura was a force of pure demolition. She used her spectral arm to grab an Antinora by its legs and used it as a club to beat the other demons. When the Judeccas tried to retreat into the floor, she slammed her fist down, ground slam, sending a shockwave that forced them back into the physical plane. Going somewhere, Sakura smirked, her devil bringer arm glowing with a supernova's intensity. The echo of the past. As they fought their way toward the center of the first circle, the landscape shifted. The bone bridge gave way to a twisted recreation of the Tsukika's estate, Hinata's mother's home. Hinata froze. The sight of the burning estate, the smell of the cherry blossoms mixed with rot, it was a psychological trap. Hina-bi, a voice whispered from the flames. Don't listen to it, Ino shouted, parrying a scythe. It's the underworld's trick. It's trying to use your memory against you. Hinata stared into the fire. She saw a silhouette, a woman with bluish-black hair, holding out her hand. It looked like Harumi. It smelled like Harumi. Mother. Hinata whispered, her blade lowering. The silhouette's face suddenly split open, revealing a vertical row of needle-like teeth. The demon, a mirage succubus, lunged for Hinata's throat. Clink. The demon stopped. Hinata hadn't looked up, but Yamato was drawn just enough to block the fangs. My mother died with a smile on her face to protect me, Hinata said, her voice dropping to a sub-zero temperature. You are an insult to her memory. Hinata unleashed a judgment cut end. The entire estate was sliced into ribbons of light. The mirage succubus didn't even have time to scream as it was erased from existence. The heart of the gate. At the end of the bridge stood a massive, beating heart made of veins and iron, the Hellgate core. It was what kept the portal to the land of iron open. We destroy that, and the gate closes, Sakura said, her fist revving. But it'll trap us here. Good, Hinata said, her white and blue devil trigger form beginning to shimmer around her. I'm tired of hiding in the human world. Let the demons realize that the Sparda daughters aren't the prey. We are the hunters. Wait, Ino said, her eyes widening as she looked past the core. A massive shadow descended from the obsidian spires. It was a man, or what used to be a man. He wore shattered armor and carried a blade that looked like a jagged tooth. His eyes were hollow, glowing with a purple, necrotic flame. Grandfather. Hinata breathed. It wasn't Sparda. It was the corrupted spirit of Harumi's father, the man who had cast Hinata's mother out. Mundus had resurrected him as a Nello-type knight to serve as the final guardian. The weak must be purged, the undead knight rasped, raising his sword. Hinata stepped forward, Yamato glowing with the light of a dying star. I agree, grandfather. Let's start with you. The three girls charged, the clash of their weapons shaking the very foundations of the underworld. Chapter 14. The Sin of the Patriarch. The heart of the first circle was a cathedral of gore. Veins as thick as tree trunks pulsed within the walls, pumping liquid hate through the architecture of the abyss. In the center stood the corrupted grandfather, once the proud head of the Tsukika's clan, now a hollowed-out puppet of Mundus. He was a Nello-type knight, clad in obsidian armor that bled purple light from the joints. The girl, with the traitor's eyes, the knight rasped. The sound was like dry leaves being crushed. You carry her scent. The scent of weakness. The scent of Harumi. Hinata stepped forward, her boots crunching on the calcified bone floor. You speak of my mother as if her kindness was a flaw. But it was her kindness that brought my father back from the dark. It was her kindness that created me. She drew Yamato fully. The blade hissed as it met the demonic atmosphere. And it is my hand that will finally put your hateful soul to rest. The triple threat. The corrupted grandfather didn't move like a human. He was a blur of necrotic speed. He swung his jagged greatsword in a horizontal sweep that would have leveled a skyscraper. Royal Guard. Ino didn't dodge. She stepped into the path of the blade, holding rebellion sideways. A shockwave of red energy erupted at the point of impact. She didn't just block, she absorbed the kinetic force. With a manic grin, she released it all back in a release counter blast that sent the giant knight reeling. Sakura. Now, Ino yelled. Sakura was already airborne. She had revved her devil bringer to its absolute limit, the blue glow turning into a blinding white heat. Buster. Her spectral arm expanded, becoming a titan-sized claw that snatched the knight out of the air. She slammed him into the pulsating floor once, twice, 3 times, each impact cracking the obsidian armor. But the knight was resilient. He fired a burst of purple energy from his chest, forcing Sakura to jump back. He's regenerating, Sakura shouted, watching the cracks in the knight's armor seal themselves with black sludge. He's drawing power from the Hellgate core, Hinata observed, her eyes glowing with a lethal clarity. We have to sever his connection and strike at the soul simultaneously. Ino, distract his guard. Sakura, go for the core. I'll deliver the verdict. The dance of death. The girls moved in a symphony of destruction. Ino began a relentless combo of swordmaster strikes, her blade dancing against the knight's heavy sword. She was a whirlwind of red steel, forcing the grandfather to focus entirely on defense. Sakura lunged toward the beating heart of the Hellgate. A swarm of Hellcane rose to stop her, but she didn't slow down. She used Streak, propelling herself through the mob like a cannonball. She grabbed the core with her spectral arm and began to squeeze. The knight let out a shriek of agony as his power source was crushed. Now, Hinata! Ino screamed, sliding beneath the knight's legs and slashing at his hamstrings. Hinata didn't run. She closed her eyes. The world slowed down. She could see the threads of the knight's soul, the thin, blackened tethers that bound him to this world. She entered her devil trigger form, her white hair flowing upward like a flame. Judgment cut end. The space around the knight fractured. Hinata appeared and disappeared in a dozen places at once, each movement leaving behind a blue rift of lethality. The knight stood frozen as the rifts began to collapse. Slice, slice, slice. The obsidian armor fell away in geometric pieces. Beneath the mask, for one fleeting second, the eyes of the man who had once been the Tsukika's patriarch cleared. He looked at Hinata, and in that moment, he didn't see a filthy abomination. He saw his daughter's daughter. Forgive me, he whispered. Rest, Hinata said softly. With a final click of her sheathing the blade, the knight disintegrated into white ash. Behind him, the Hellgate core exploded in a burst of blue energy, sending a shockwave that rattled the entire first circle. The silence after the storm. The girls stood in the ruins of the cathedral, their breaths heavy. The portal behind them was beginning to flicker. By destroying the core, they had destabilized the link between the underworld and the land of iron. We did it, Sakura panted, her devil bringer arm slowly shrinking back to its human size. Is it over? Hinata looked deeper into the abyss, where a massive, white-winged shadow was beginning to rise from the lower circles. The pressure was so immense it felt like the air itself was trying to crush their lungs. No, Hinata said, her voice steady despite the trembling of the ground. Mundus is waking up. We've only cleared the doorstep. Suddenly, a familiar red motorcycle skidded into the chamber, carrying Dante and Virgil. Dante looked around at the pile of ash and the shattered core. Not bad, girls, Dante grinned, wiping some demon blood off his face. But the big guy downstairs is really ticked off about his heart being broken. I think it's time we showed him the exit. Virgil stood beside Hinata, his hand resting on her shoulder. It was a rare gesture of affection, but it spoke volumes. You have done well, Hinata. Now, stand behind me. The Prince of Darkness is coming, and he does not play fair. The five of them stood together as the floor beneath them crumbled, dropping them into the final arena where the fate of two worlds would be decided. Chapter 15. The Prince and the Prodigies. The descent felt like falling through the throat of a dying god. The floor of the cathedral didn't just break, it dissolved into a sea of white clouds and golden light, a cruel, mocking imitation of heaven. This was the throne room of Mundus, the Prince of Darkness. In the center of the infinite expanse stood a statue of colossal proportions, a marble white figure with 3 eyes and wings that spanned the horizon. But as the Sparda family landed, the marble began to crack, shedding its stony skin to reveal the pulsating, magma-like entity beneath. Sparda, the voice of Mundus boomed, vibrating through their very marrow. You bring your spawn to the altar of their extinction. Your bloodline has been a stain on this universe for too long. Blah, 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 Dante said, stepping forward while casually spinning ebony and ivory. You really need some new material, big guy. Seriously, the god act as so 2,000 years ago. Virgil didn't speak. He simply stood in a low crouch, his thumb resting on Yamato's guard. Beside him, Hinata mirrored his stance perfectly. The two of them were a study in lethal symmetry. The final war begins. Mundus didn't waste time with further pleasantries. He summoned dozens of white, needle-like spears of light and rained them down upon the platform. Ino. Sakura. Defense. Hinata commanded. Ino leapt into the air, her devil trigger flared to its maximum. She swung rebellion in a whirlwind, round trip, creating a localized barrier of red steel that batted away the spears. Sakura anchored herself to the ground with her devil bringer, manifesting a massive spectral shield that absorbed the explosions. Now, the counter. Nero yelled, his blue rose revolver barking as he fired charged shots at Mundus's central eye. The battle was a chaotic masterpiece of power. Dante and Virgil moved as a single unit, a blur of red and blue. They ascended the air using air hike and trick up, striking at Mundus's chest. But Mundus was not like the other demons. He swiped a hand, and the very space around them distorted, trying to crush the brothers between layers of reality. He's folding the dimensions. Virgil shouted. Hinata, use Yamato to stabilize the field. Hinata closed her eyes, feeling the jagged edges of the spatial distortion. She plunged Yamato into the floor of the void. Dimension slash. She didn't cut an enemy. She cut the distortion itself, stitching the space back together so her father and uncle could land their hits. The daughter's vengeance. Mundus roared in frustration, his three eyes glowing with a supernova's heat. He focused his gaze on the three girls, sensing they were the bridge between the human world and the Sparda legacy. You shall be the first to burn. A beam of pure, white-hot energy erupted from his forehead, aimed directly at Sakura. Not on my watch, Sakura screamed. She didn't dodge. She lunged forward, her spectral arm growing to the size of a building. She caught the beam in her palm. The heat was immense, it began to melt her demonic armor, but she didn't let go. Ino, Hina, give me everything you've got. Sakura roared, her feet sliding back as she struggled against the beam. Ino appeared behind Sakura, placing her hands on Sakura's shoulders, funneling her rebellious, chaotic energy into her cousin. Hinata appeared on the other side, her cold, precise power acting as a stabilizer for the volatile mixture. The three girls combined their auras. A pillar of white, blue, and red light erupted from them, pushing back against Mundus's beam. We are the daughters of the men who defeated you. Hinata's voice echoed through the void, amplified by the spirits of their mothers. And we are the ones who will finish it. The jackpot. The combined energy of the girls cracked Mundus's physical shell. Sensing the opening, Dante and Virgil appeared on either side of the Prince of Darkness. Ready, brother? Dante asked, a wild grin on his face. Do not miss, Dante, Virgil replied coldly. They didn't use their swords. They reached out their hands, and the two halves of the amulets, the ones the girls had fought so hard to reclaim, began to glow. The amulets merged into the perfect amulet, and for a split second, the ghost of the legendary Sparda appeared behind them. Girls, now, Dante yelled. Hinata, Ino, and Sakura launched themselves forward. Jackpot. They all screamed in unison. A blast of pure, undiluted Sparda energy tore through Mundus. It wasn't just a physical strike, it was a conceptual erasure. The Prince of Darkness let out a final, world-shaking scream as his form disintegrated into golden ash, his essence scattered to the furthest corners of the void. The return. The throne room began to collapse. The light was fading, and the portal to the human world was shrinking. Move it. This place is going down. Nero shouted, grabbing Sakura and Ino. They tumbled through the rift, falling through the black pillar in the land of iron and landing in the soft, blood-stained snow. The silence that followed was deafening. The hellgate behind them groaned and then imploded, the black stone crumbling into dust until nothing remained but a scar on the earth. The five Kage, Naruto, and the surviving samurai stood in a wide circle, staring at the six figures who had just returned from hell. They looked battered, their clothes torn and their armor gone, but their eyes were the eyes of victors. Hinata stood up, sheathing Yamato one last time. She looked at Naruto, who was weeping with relief, and then at her father. Is it over? She asked. Virgil looked at the horizon, where the sun was finally beginning to rise over the land of iron. For now, Hinata. For now. Dante walked over, ruffling Ino's hair and grinning at the crowd of ninjas. So, who's buying the pizza? I think we earned it. The legend of the Sparda daughters had officially begun. The world of shinobi would never be the same, for they now knew that beneath the shadows of their villages, there were protectors who didn't use ninjutsu, they used the blood of the abyss to keep the dawn alive. Chapter 16. The Dawn of a New Dynasty. The snow in the land of iron was finally beginning to melt, not from the sun, but from the dissipating heat of a war that had almost swallowed the world. The massive black scar where the Hellgate once stood was now just a hollowed-out crater, a silent reminder of the day the earth bled. The five cage stood in a semicircle, their presence usually enough to command the respect of nations. But today, they were spectators. Their eyes were fixed on Hinata, Ino, and Sakura, who stood amidst the rubble, their breathing steady and their gazes unbroken. So, the Raikage broke the silence, his voice uncharacteristically quiet. You closed it. You actually closed the gate to hell. We didn't just close it, Ino said, wiping a streak of demon ichor from her forehead with the back of her hand. She winced as her rebellion sword vanished back into her soul, the sudden absence of its weight making her shoulders ache. We evicted the landlord. Tsunade stepped forward, looking at the girls with a mixture of pride and profound sorrow. As the Hokage, she saw three of her finest genin. As a woman who had seen too much war, she saw children who had been forced to become gods. The council in Konoha, they will have questions, Tsunade said. Hiyashi, Inoichi, they are waiting for their daughters. Hinata turned her head slowly. Her lavender eyes were back, but they lacked the softness they once possessed. They were the eyes of a Sparda now, sharp, analytical, and ancient. They are waiting for heiresses, Hinata said, her voice sounding like the chime of a frozen bell. They are waiting for daughters who will carry on their traditions. But those girls died in the vault beneath the village. We cannot go back to being your genin, Lady Hokage. The parting of ways. Virgil stood behind Hinata, a shadow of blue against the white landscape. He didn't look at the cage. To him, they were irrelevant, brief flickers of light in a universe of eternal storms. The blood has awakened, Virgil stated. To return to your villages would be to cage a tempest in a paper lantern. You have a duty now. Not to a hidden village, but to the balance of the realms. Dante leaned against a shattered stone pillar, tossing a silver coin into the air. Hey, don't be so dramatic, Verge. Kids need to eat, too. And I hear Konoha has some decent ramen. He looked at the girls. The choice is yours. You can come with us to the Devil May Cry shop, learn the business, and travel the world, or you can try to fix the mess you left behind in the leaf. Sakura looked at her father, Nero, who was leaning against his sword, Red Queen. I love the village, Sakura said softly, her green eyes shimmering. But every time I look at my hand, I see a monster. And every time I look at the people there, I see them looking at me with fear. I want to be somewhere where I don't have to hide the devil in me. Ino nodded in agreement. I'm done with flower arrangements and rivalries over boys. I want to see what else is out there. I want to find out what happened to our mother's legacies. The final promise. Naruto pushed his way through the crowd of samurai, his face stained with tears and soot. He stopped in front of Hinata, his breath hitching. So that's it? He asked. You're just leaving? After everything? Hinata, I finally saw how amazing you are. I was going to ask you to train with me. Hinata reached out, her fingers brushing Naruto's cheek. It was a gesture of ghost-like tenderness. Naruto, you were the only light I saw when I was trapped in the dark of the Hyuga house. You taught me to never give up. And I didn't. I didn't give up on my family. She leaned in, whispering into his ear so only he could hear. Keep your dream. Become the Hokage. And if the shadows ever grow too dark for your will of fire to burn away, call my name. I will cut a path through hell itself to reach you. She stepped back, joining her father and her cousins. The vanishing. Virgil drew Yamato with a sharp, lightning-fast motion. He didn't strike an enemy, he struck the air. A rift of blue light tore open, a gateway to a place beyond maps and borders. Wait, the Raikage yelled, reaching out. We need to know how to stop the remaining demons. Figure it out, Dante smirked, stepping into the rift. Or call the shop. were in the book. One by one, the Sparda family stepped through the tear in reality. Hinata was the last. She looked back at the world of shinobi, at the cage, the samurai, and the boy in the orange jumpsuit. She gave a small, enigmatic smile, the first true smile of her life. Click. She sheathed her blade, and the rift snapped shut, leaving nothing behind but a swirl of snow and the silence of a new era. The land of iron was empty of demons, but it was filled with the realization that the world had changed. The age of ninjas was still here, but above them, in the cracks between the stars and the shadows of the earth, the daughters of Sparda were watching. Their story wasn't over. It was just beginning. And that's it. The girls have chosen their path. They are no longer bound by the laws of men or the seals of the ninja. They are the hunters of the night, the heirs to the dark night. Chapter 17. 5 years later, the Shop of Shadows. The city of Fortuna had seen its share of hellfire, but today, it was merely drenched in a torrential downpour. Rain lashed against the neon sign of a small, nondescript storefront on the outskirts of the city. The sign flickered with a rhythmic buzz, casting a dim purple light onto the sidewalk, "Devil May Cry." Inside, the atmosphere was a stark contrast to the storm. The scent of wood smoke, strawberry sundaes, and high-grade gun oil filled the air. A young woman sat at a mahogany desk, her boots propped up next to a stack of unpaid bills. She wore a high-collared, sleeveless navy blue trench coat over a sleek black bodysuit. Her bluish-black hair was tied back in a practical, sharp ponytail, and her lavender eyes were focused on a small, ancient whetstone as she ran it along the edge of a white-sheathed katana. Hinata Sparda was no longer the girl who stuttered. At 11 years old, though she carried the presence of someone centuries older, she was the anchor of the shop. "Hina, the phone's been ringing for 10 minutes, a voice groaned from the back room. Ino emerged, stretching her arms above her head. She had grown taller, her blonde hair kept in a wild, stylish braid. She wore a red leather vest and chaps that bore the faint, scorched marks of a battle with a greater demon in the land of Earth just last week. "Are we taking the job or what? I'm bored, and my wardrobe needs an upgrade." "It's a request from the land of fire," Hinata said without looking up. "A high-priority summons. Something is tearing through the border patrols near the old ruins of the Uchiha district." The land of fire. A third girl walked in, wiping grease from her hands onto a rag. Sakura had traded her academy dress for a rugged, tactical ensemble. Her right arm was perpetually covered by a specialized, reinforced sleeve, but the way the fabric hummed with blue electricity gave away the power of the devil bringer beneath. "That's Naruto's territory. I thought he had things under control as the hero of the leaf." "He does," Hinata replied, finally sheathing Yamato with a sharp click. "But this isn't a ninja problem. The energy signature is Nello level. It's a remnant of Mundus's personal guard that got left behind when the gate imploded." The reunion. The journey to the leaf didn't take days. With Yamato, the distance was merely a matter of a single, well-placed vertical slash. They stepped out of a blue rift directly into the Hokage's office. The man behind the desk jumped, his orange cloak fluttering. Naruto Uzumaki, now a young man and a budding leader, stared at the three figures who had just materialized in front of his paperwork. "You guys really need to learn how to use a door," Naruto laughed, though his eyes were wide with relief. "Hinata, Ino, Sakura, you look powerful. And you look tired, Naruto," Hinata said, a ghost of a smile touching her lips. "Where is it?" "The forest of the south," Naruto said, his expression turning serious. "It's not just killing people, Hinata. It's eating the chakra out of the land. My best trackers can't even get within a mile of it without fainting." "That's because it's not eating chakra," Sakura explained, checking the cylinders on her customized revolver. "It's a Sin Scissors variant. It's eating the spiritual will of the area. You guys keep trying to fight it with ninjutsu, which is like trying to put out a fire with gasoline. Leave it to the professionals," Ino smirked, tossing a silver coin to Naruto. "Consider this a pro bono job for old time's sake." The hunt. The forest was silent, a dead, heavy silence that Hinata recognized all too well. In the center of a blackened clearing stood a creature draped in tattered white robes, carrying a pair of shears the size of a windmill. Target spotted, Hinata whispered. They didn't use formations. They didn't need them. They moved with a telepathic synchronicity born of 5 years of hunting in the deepest pits of the underworld. Sakura led the charge, her devil bringer arm expanding into a massive spectral fist. She caught the shears mid-swing, the metal shrieking against her demonic scales. Buster. She threw the creature into the air. Ino was already there, spinning rebellion in a terrifying dance macabre. Each strike carved a glowing red line into the demon's form, the speed of her blades creating a cage of steel. Finally, Hinata appeared above the demon. She wasn't in her devil trigger, but the air around her was freezing. She held Yamato in a reverse grip. Judgment cut. One slash. One single, perfect line through the fabric of existence. The demon didn't even have time to dissolve. It simply ceased to be. The legacy continues. As the sun began to set over Konoha, the 3 girls stood on the head of the 4th Hokage, looking out over the village that had once been their cage. Think we should stay for dinner? Ino asked, looking toward the lights of the ramen shop. We have a mission in the land of lightning at dawn, Hinata said, though her gaze lingered on the academy. And Uncle Dante said if we're late, he's eating all the pizza. In that case, Sakura revved the invisible engine in her soul, let's move. They turned away from the village, 3 legends in the making. They were the bridge between 2 worlds, the daughters of the abyss, and the protectors of the light. As long as the shadows grew too long, the Sparda would be there to cut them down. Hinata looked at the moon one last time, her blue eyes flashing with a spark of infinite power. The story goes on, she whispered. She drew her blade, cut the air, and the daughters of Sparda vanished into the night. This concludes the journey. From the tragedies of their childhood to the triumph over Mundus, Hinata, Ino, and Sakura have redefined what it means to be a hero in the world of shinobi.